So hello guys, I'm Ewan if you don't know me. I'm going to be talking about a very big problem that my client had when it came to rendering UI components in a stream chat. And we had a really bad strategy before. I'm going to show you what it was before and then what it looks like after. So I made a really simple demo of it and I want you guys to just take a look. So I want you guys to just look at this right now and then I want you guys to just tell me what you think could be improved just from when I click this send demo message. So I'm going to click it right now. So you can see all the UI components are popping up, which is great. And then an artifact view comes up. It looks like Claude, right? But what is kind of not up to par when you see this? What do you think could be improved? Do you want me to run this again and have it take another look?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool.
The user should not see the tags, the UI components that is supposed to be streamed in website files.
Also, there's a bunch of XML tags that the user can see, and it's you can only see the UI component, then the whole thing finishes, and it's it wasn't very good. Okay, what's different about how this shows up compared to how Claude shows the artifact view? For this one was definitely worse, but what made this one worse?
It makes a big layout shift.
Yeah, that's one. But also what was bad about it is that the entire content just shows up right away. With Claude, the content gets streamed in and it gets streamed in within the component as well. Same with all of these yellow components as well. Those ones, they need a new UI component for every single item, even though they're all the same thing. It would be much nicer if we could just group them all into one UI. That'll be much easier for our user to look at. Okay, there's one more thing. I'll just give you guys this one because this one's a bit more niche as well. Since we're using XML tags, a lot of the logic with distinguishing the different UI components is solely respondent on the AI properly being able to write the correct XML tags for the right UI components. And you get a lot of issues where you have this random shit at the end where it's just slash clarification where it's not meant to be there. That often happened 20% of the time in the chats, which is way too much. I want you guys to think, we'll work on this together. So you can see what was bad. Visible XML before UI components complete. There's re-rendering issues as well because we have to parse the XML every time we get a new chunk. That makes it really laggy for long chats and quite difficult to interleave UI components. It's hard to generate text within UI components as well, as you can see with the artifact as well. And also, more importantly, the logic is very dependent on the UI being able to generate the correct XML tag. So what do you think some solutions to this are? If there's so many problems with XML, what should we do to improve it? Yeah, who said get rid of it? That's pretty much it, just get rid of it, right? We're just going to get rid of XML and we're just going to send JSON chunks. So it's a lot better that way because OpenAI and a lot of the AI SDKs, they allow you to have structured outputs, which is a lot more stable than having XML tags. And if you have your tool to just send the structured output, depending on what UI component you want, it's a lot easier to make it more stable on the front end. But that makes it stable on the back end. How do we make this stable on the front end? Because we want to be able to show these chunks in a way that we can show them in order in the front end. But how can we do that? What's a data structure we can use to basically just put things in order? Don't worry about the really complicated data structures like trees or graphs or whatever. Think about really primitive stuff. What can we use?
Arrays.
Yeah, an array. We just put everything in one fat array. It will just order everything pretty well. But what's one problem with that? There's a bunch of different structures reasoning, web search, vector search is messages, which are just strings. Artifacts contain a bunch of different JSON objects. What's the problem with putting this all in one array? Yeah, who said data types? Yeah. Okay, having a bunch of different heterogeneous data types in one array just sucks for TypeScript because before compile time, TypeScript is looking at the array, it's just I don't know what's meant to be in here. I'm just going to guess and you're going to have to tell me what it is at runtime, which can cause a lot of overhead. It's not as laggy, but it's not good practice to do that. So the solution for that, we used a normalized state management strategy. And basically what that is, it's a lot of very big words, but normalized state just means making the heterogeneous array into a homogeneous array where everything's the same. And the way to do that is to just have this kind of structure in the array where it's just a data type with two fields, the type of the chunk that's coming in, and also a reference ID, which I'll get to in later. So we call this array the positioning array, which tells me the position of each of the UI components. And then it will basically tell me what order it's meant to come in. So for example, over here, it will be like reasoning, web search, reasoning, vector search, message, blah, blah, blah. And it will have an ID associated with it. Cool. And that's for the positioning of the UI components. So we've done with the positioning of the UI components, but like where did all the data go? So like we have the chunks coming in, we're able to position it correctly in the array. Where does the data go? Like the data is just gone. What we do is we actually use that reference ID and we put all the data in their separate like buckets where they have their similar data types, where they have their similar objects all grouped together. So that way, our typing is not solely reliant on this one positioning array being able to accommodate for all these different types. It's just one array of the same thing, which references all of these different buckets that contain all of the actual data inside of it. Cool. So for example, for all the reasoning chunks, every time a reasoning chunk comes in, it'll just be chucked into this reasoning repository, and then it will have a key, which is the reference ID, to the actual object itself, which contains all of the content. Same with the message repository as well. It'll have a reference ID and then the actual message object. Same with vector search and stuff. And you can actually like, this is very maintainable because you can add as many different UI components as you like. All you need to do is just add a new repository of like different objects. And then that's a lot of like concepts thrown at you. So I had a diagram that kind of puts it all together. This is an example of the positioning array. So for example, let's say like a chunk for reasoning comes in, a chunk for web search comes in, a chunk for reasoning comes in, and a chunk for vector search comes in. You get the reasoning chunk, you chuck into the reasoning repository. You get the web search chunk, you chuck into the web search repository. Same with the reasoning, you chuck into the same reasoning repository. And same with the vector search, you chuck it into the vector search repository. And then how do we actually like render this in the UI? We basically iterate through each of the array and then just go to the repository and then just chuck it to the front end, okay? So this is basically how the UI will look inside your chat. The reasoning repository, it gets the first item in the array, goes to the repository and then chucks it to the front. Same with the web search, it goes to the web search and then chucks it at the front. The third item is a reasoning item, so it goes to the repository and chucks it to the UI. And then for the last one, it's a vector search, so it will get the vector search from the repository and chuck it in. Yes?
How do you make sure the order is correct? Like, how do you iterate through all these repositories and, you know, check in where it's belongs?
Yeah, good question. So we don't actually iterate through these repositories, we iterate through the array. So if I show you the code for like the good implementation, it's actually just this array, and then we do a map. And then every time we do a map, we check the type, we go to the repository, we grab the item, and then we chuck it to the front end. We render it to the front end. And it will make a lot more sense when I show you the code. It's basically just one big switch statement, right? A map and then a switch statement inside of it. So that's what the UI looks like for that kind of stuff. So this is an example of what the UI will look like when it's rendered. And what if like a bunch of the same message chunk comes in as well? Like what if it's like a bunch of message chunks? Like for example, when ChatGPT like generates a response to you, it doesn't generate the entire response all in one go. It sends it you into tiny little bits. How do we like accommodate for that with this one? Do we just make like a bunch of items in the repository with the same like tiny chunk? That would be pretty bloated. So what we do instead, we'll just get all of those chunks and chuck it into the same render section item and then put it all into one item in the repository. That way the UI can actually just like look for whatever is inside the repository and render it regardless of what's inside it at the moment. It sounds very confusing, but basically this allows it to generate text within the UI component, okay? So for example, let's say like none of these like items came in yet. Inside the message repository, it will just be AP for now, right? And in the UI, it will be AP, right? And then the PL comes in, which is next in Apple, right? It will be APPL in the message repository, and the UI will reflect that and say APPAL, so APPL. And then the last one comes in, it'll be all Apple, and then the UI will reflect that as well. So it's able to generate within. This is even better because you can actually wrap this in a UI component, and then the message is able to be rendered is able to be streamed within the UI component as well. Now, if you combine all of these things, it allows you to do stuff like this. So I can go to the good version of this, and then I want you to think of like what the difference between this implementation is to the previous implementation where we use a lot of XML. So if I send a demo message, you can see like it's able to add shit into it, and like in the artifact view, it's able to generate the text within the item as well. And also this is a lot more type safe, and you're able to chuck like a bunch of different shit on. You can even put like a message in between over here because the positioning array is the only thing that matters. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So basically like too long didn't read, okay? If you have anything, like any client that has to do with like rendering different UI components as they're being streamed in, use this strategy because it's very like, your front end will thank you for it. And also it's very maintainable to just add a bunch of shit into it as well. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you guys. Yes, any questions for this one? Yeah.
When you say repository, like what does it mean? Is it like a database or something?
Oh, I probably should have mentioned that. It's just a hash map. So if I go to the actual Excalibur that I used, all these repositories are basically just like a key value store. There's a hash map. So every time we go to like the position array, and then we see that it's a reasoning type, we basically go to the reasoning repository and be like, hey, I'm looking for an item with ID 1. It'll grab this and then chuck it to the front end.
But where does these repository live? Is it actually in memory in the browser, like the JS, or is it in the database? Or?
So since this is being streamed in, we have this in memory, and I'll show you the structure for it as well. Here it is. So if you look over here with the render sections, that's basically the positioning array for everything. If you look at the type of render section, you can see that it has an ID, which is like not very important. It has the type, which is the type of the stream chunk, and also the reference ID, which references the different buckets. And these over here are the different buckets that it references. So all of this is within one stateful object that I can just chuck to like Zustan or whatever. And now all my UI components, they can just listen to that and re-render just their specific component whenever that entire state like changes, okay? So it doesn't like re-render the entire chunk every single time a new chunk comes in. Yeah, so that's basically it. I have a thinking state 1 and a chat state 1. The only reason why is because I don't want the entire thinking like section to like re-render as like message object comes in, because the thinking state won't be touched at all once the messages start coming in because it's done thinking. So yeah, just to reiterate. So this is like the position array, and the top ones are like all the repositories, which are all like the hash maps that we use. Cool, all right. Yeah, no worries. Thank you guys. Yes, sir. Yeah. And wait, let me try to find the thinking stream. Yeah, this is like the giant switch that we see. It's like thinking state, render sections dot map, and then it just checks the section type, and then it will get the actual reasoning text like object, and then it will just render it as is. Yeah. If it's more complicated, obviously you put this entire thing into like a separate component, but like, well, this is good enough for now. Okay. All good? Yeah. Okay, that's it. Thank you guys.